So, welcome everyone to the Calm Scribing conversation with. Tonight, we're in conversation with Mermaid Serenade, who is a Mexican American artist based in upstate New York. She's received her BFA in painting from the Pacific Northwest College of Art in 2011. She makes Papel Picado themed works of art, comics, and piñatas. She's a mom to one awesome little gremlin, loves making homemade Mexican food, playing skee ball, watching horror movies, and playing video games. So welcome, Mermaid Serenade. I am very excited for us to have this conversation. How are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming through. This is a lot. I've been talking about this for a while now, but this has been in the pipes for a couple months, I think. And so I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've been following you for a while on Twitch. I need to fix this here. For those of you that do want to connect with Mermaid Serenade, I'll be the first one to type it in. Those are
Thanks.
all the ways that you can connect and say hello and follow, which I highly recommend doing because, frankly, you're an awesome person and your artwork is awesome, amazing. I first started following you because you caught my eye because you were doing a comic book or a comic that
hmm
you were drawing. So tell us a little bit about yourself apart from the bio.
Yeah. So I would say that, I'm an artist. I've been making art for most of my life, probably most seriously since 2005 when I first, left high school and went into art school. And my adventure on Twitch has been really fun. And I decided with Twitch I was just going to make whatever I want, and that's been, my more traditional stuff, which is like the papel picado painting and drawing and watercolor. But I'm also doing like the piñatas and the comic book, which has been a really fun way to just reach for everything. I think art school really pigeonholes you into believing that you should like only create a certain type of art sometimes. And so it's been really fun to like break out of that.
Well, that's
um,
yeah, that's one of the things that caught my eye about you is just exactly that I've seen. Um, I would go in and see you working on this comic, and then a little while later, I'd go in and I'd see you working on a painting, or I'd see you working on a pinata or something, and there was just so much variety in what was happening, and that's something that I like. I'm a very same thing with writing. I don't stick to one genre. I write horror, I write science fiction, I write psychological thriller, and I write children's books.
that's awesome.
So yeah, it's the eclecticness of I think is partially what drew me to you.
I think it's really important to lean into that diversity, Like I think that like if you're somebody who wants to make one thing and that's what makes you happy, like go for it. Um but if you're interested in doing different things, that you should totally tackle that too, because like you reach different audiences with different types of works of art, and different people connect with you in different ways. So you definitely shouldn't pigeonhole yourself in any way.
Exactly. If you can keep yourself spread open, and it also makes life more interesting for you,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And that's something that we all definitely want. So actually, there is a question I do have for you. If you may have caught earlier, I was just before we came on. I was talking to chat about writing, and when you start a story, just because you get your story written down, doesn't mean that
hmm
that's the story. You can cut out massive chunks if you don't like. So if you get to a point where you're kind of stuck, write it out, get to where you need to go, and then you can go back and erase and fix and change. And I was
Yeah.
saying that even great artists like yourself, I'm sure when you're starting a painting or you're starting a sketch for the first time, you don't throw lines down and have them fall exactly where you want them the first time. There's
Yeah,
going
no.
back and reworking and resketching, right?
No, definitely. And I'm kind of happy you brought that up, because I feel like that I really connect with that idea of like feeling like you're stuck somewhere. I would say there's a period of like 3 or 4 years where I was like making what I thought were like good academic contemporary paintings, but they weren't connecting with me. And it was bizarre because I had kind of like, followed my whole little script. I was doing what I thought was correct. And just kept making a bunch of stuff that I didn't like for a really long time. And it wasn't until I actually completely like threw that whole idea out and kind of restarted from scratch, and then created like a whole new thing, and then slowly but surely little pieces of that old practice I had that I wanted to keep made its way into my new work. So I completely agree. Like, sometimes the purpose of a story is to get you to the next story or get you to the next thing, and you either return to it or you take what you need from it and you bring it with you to the next thing too sometimes. So It's all a process. But I was definitely very hardcore in believing like I had to finish every painting to be perfect. Every drawing needed to be perfect every time. And that I would say that that's not what I think at all anymore. Like I just did Inktober, and I would say out of the 31 drawings that I made, the ones that I was happy with were probably like 9 out of 31.
Wow.
So I think that there's like, I don't know, I think the more you work, the more you just realize how much editing matters in the end.
It does. Even in visual arts, editing does
Yeah.
matter for that.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff you guys don't see that I don't share.
Well, that's it. I'm thrilled that you actually said that because it does really tie in well with that. And that's really it. I love the fact that you said that sometimes a story is meant to bring you to another story, and that's very true. And that's something that I find that every story has its time and place. Sometimes you'll start working on it and realize that it's just not the time for this, and you'll walk away from it and go back to it at some point, like you said, some point down the road. But yeah, and even if you have a story that you don't really connect with, like the October drawings, it doesn't mean that it's a bad story. It means that it's not something necessarily that you're connecting with right now. You can always go back and tweak it and work it. But another thing I advocate for in the writing world is if you do cut a scene or a chapter or something out of your story, don't throw it away. Put it into
Yeah.
an alternate file, because it'll make great side stories. It'll make great canon
Mhm.
for other parts of the universe, or it may fit into another story perfectly. So
Yeah.
don't get rid of it. So I'm sure the same thing goes kind of with sketches. If you've got sketches you like, you've set them aside.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even though I only really loved 9 out of the 31, I keep all of them because whenever in the future you do have moments where you get stuck, it's always helpful to look backwards and to look at some other things because maybe a part that you didn't appreciate before makes more sense to you now, or you're seeing it in a different way and you're like, oh, actually, that does have a lot of potential. Oh, this is a really good place to follow. And it didn't make sense. And I cut it out, back then, but now I can re-invite it back into my practice. Like, it's everything is super malleable and organic when it comes to being creative and doing creative work.
Yeah, that's very well said. I love it. Hey, Lore Master Quinn, we're doing well. We're just in conversation with Mermaid Serenade. We're doing the Calm Scrapping conversation tonight. I hope you're doing well, Quinn. But yeah, that's the so talking about that actually was the idea of being pigeonholed and being caught in one particular style or genre. In the writing world, there is a lot of gatekeeping. There's a lot of you have to put down so many words per day to be a writer. You have to have traveled so much to be a writer. You have to have been doing all of you have to pass certain benchmarks to be considered a writer or to be considered good. Do you find that's the same thing in the visual arts community, where there's like, if you're not following the classic style of doing this type of art, then you're not considered good?
Yes, I mean, yeah, first of all, yes, absolutely. There's gatekeepers in the art world, absolutely. Like the gallerists who know who the buyers are. The buyers list is very kept private. It's not public information, and it's absolutely gate kept by the people who are in power who are trying to make money. There's a whole system involved. The other thing that they don't tell you about art school in general, and I don't know if this applies to writing, but like if you are already wealthy and you try to become an artist, it's much easier for you to be successful. And the reason why is because after you go to undergrad, you're supposed to go to grad school, and after going to a good grad school, you're supposed to get like, a teaching residency at another school, or you can go to a regular residency, which costs money. They're all like paid for residencies. But these residencies are where you meet already successful artists and and there's also writing residencies too, but already successful writers, and you network. And the idea is you network so much and you do so many residencies that you have the ability to connect with so many people that you're able to get these shows, and you're able to sort of like leverage and have conversations about your work. And that's all so much easier, when you have that financial backing. So I don't say that to discourage anyone from being an artist, but I will say that, I wish that I had kind of leaned into my more vulnerable ideas and work instead of trying to fit into that. Because I think when you don't have that privilege, um, you should just lean into making the work that scares you the most, because you kind of have like nothing to lose. So you like might as well, like make the weird stuff and make the stuff that's, you're not really sure what's going on with it, and just try to be yourself as much as possible and figure out who you are, because authenticity is the only other way I feel like you can get in the club.
Yeah, that sounds very accurate to that. And there's a lot of that stuff in the classical music world and the writing world as well, where it's because also money attracts money, right? So if
Yeah.
you're in those circles, even if you don't have a lot of money, but you're able to somehow be in those circles and you're able to have those conversations and make those contacts, then that will attract either donors or people that will want to sponsor you, or people that will say, you know what, like I'll pay for this to get you into the show. I'll pay you for the next couple of weeks to just focus on your art. And so it's money
Hmm.
does attract money. So being in those circles really does kind of help out.
Hmm.
But it's interesting that because I don't know if a lot of people think about that perspective of the galleries, because I know the last artist that I interviewed were talking about it, and they were saying how galleries have built themselves in this really wonderful setup where they tell you what's good, they tell you what's
Yeah.
acceptable, they tell you what should be bought, and they tell you the value of things, and they
Yep.
really control everything. So like you're saying, that they know the buyers list, they know what's wanted. It's kind of the same thing with having being a new writer and trying to get your work published. Is you have to go to these publishing houses, and you either oftentimes have to give up your story because it's what scared you the most and what you were vulnerable in creating this piece of art.
Hmm.
And when you bring it to them, they say, well, that's not what the market wants right now, that's not what the buyers are buying right now, so you need to change it and make it like this so it's more palatable to the common market
Yeah.
and completely alter your work. So that's where we're seeing a lot more of an increase of self-publishing. Not just that
Yeah.
people weren't good enough to get published by the traditional publishing houses, is people actively turning their backs on the traditional publishing houses because they don't want to give up their universe. They don't want to give up what they created to, like, they're more willing to accept less sales
Yeah.
than to give up what their child is.
I mean, and I think that's super smart for them to do that. I mean, like if you're capable of doing that in your life, and that's something you can, if you can put your art and your practice above that kind of system, I think it absolutely needs to be done. Like and it's so frustrating that there are gatekeepers who are like, oh, this isn't popular, so we can't, we can't spend money on this, or this, nobody knows who you are, so we can't, validate this idea. Because the reality is, like, artists and writers from all around the world have stories to share, whether it's through their art or through writing. But like no one lives in a little box not experiencing the world around them. Other people are going to relate to that story, and just because a market doesn't exist for it now, it doesn't mean there aren't people who would connect with it, so
Exactly.
it just feels like the people who are in control of making those decisions just don't want to be the first ones to take the risk, so it's unfortunately a lot of us do have to do the hard work of like, okay, well, I'm just going to go on the outside and try to make this life work. And hopefully, someone will catch on and make it sustainable.
Exactly. And yeah, you're right, Quinn. This is happening across the creative world. It seems to be all over the place. And the more I do these interviews or chats with creatives, the more I'm seeing these kind of overlaps. There's one thing that'll happen in the writing world, and I'm kind of curious if it happens in the art world as well, because it's been a long time since I've been in it. And so in the writing world, there'll be situations where your story will be optioned for a television show, for a series, or something, or a movie,
Mhm.
and it can sit for years before it ever, or even for publishing, it can sit, be picked up by a publishing house and sit for years before it gets put into print or moved into any kind of movement for it. And there's some instances where it'll be picked up and it will never make it. The
Yeah.
market changes, whatever. There's things that stop the story from being made into it. And there's also some less friendly scenarios with this, where a story will be picked up just so it can be sat on, because another story is
Uh,
similar to it is going to be coming out down the road that the studio is
uh,
more interested in, or that someone else is more interested in. So they don't want they know this other thing is coming. They don't want competition against it, so they'll pick it up and sit on it. Is this
mhm.
kind of similar stuff? Does this happen in the art world as well, where people will like kind of pick something up just to keep it away or end up with it away from public eye?
Um, I wouldn't say that in particular. What I would say is there's a lot of creative borrowing and appropriation that already established artists do. So, an example of this would be like, um, an example of this would be like, uh, like so digital art is something that's like kind of is a little bit frowned upon in the fine art world. It's kind of coming up. It's people are using it a lot more. It's a lot more respected in the last 5 to 10 years than it was before then. But when it first came out, it was like really poo-pooed by the art world. But now you have like super established artists who are using these incredible creative digital design programs now and who are doing a lot of the ideas that artists have already been doing for a long time but are kind of obscure and not and were not popular when they were doing it. But now that like a more established artist is like using this medium, it legitimizes the medium because that artist is already legitimized. So I wouldn't say it's like somebody is like, somebody's work is like sat on because something else is more popular. But I would say that more established artists are, you know, able to take these sort of like less known mediums and make them more popular when they've been around for a long time already and people have already been making incredible work with these programs. And so I would say there's a little bit of creative appropriation.
Yeah, and it's kind of waiting for the door to be opened by someone with enough credibility
Yeah,
to
yeah,
come along.
exactly.
And that's one of the things that really drives me wild in the writing community is when you see, and again, it comes down to money and to fame. But when you see a actor or an actress or someone or athlete all of a sudden come out with even the simplest of books, and then it becomes an instant top bestseller
Yeah,
because like there could be no content in it at all, but because this person's name is on it, it becomes an instant top seller or a
yeah,
best-selling book. And that's kind of frustrating where it's like there's other books out there that are so much better written and people have spent so much more time on,
yeah,
and because there's not the name recognition, they just get lost
yeah.
in the cracks along the way.
Yeah, I would say just as a good rule of thumb for any creative person, don't think for a second that being marketable and being able to pull in a lot of money means that the work is good because that's not the case. There's a lot of really shitty artists making tons of money. I'm sure none of them would appreciate me saying that, so I won't name any examples here,
Yeah,
but
that's probably best. But you're right, and that's the thing. Like, I can't tell you how many times my wife has like been looking, like reading a book and put it down partway through and looked at me and been like, "This is like, how is this published?" And I mean, this my science fiction novel is not finished yet, and my thriller is still being revised. But yeah, where she'd look and be like, your stuff is definitely going to like do really well because if this can get picked up. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not going to name names, but there's stuff that comes through, and it's just like that's the
garbage.
unfortunate fact of it. Yeah, it's not the greatest stuff, but and that's the thing, you never know what's going to get picked up and what's
Yeah.
going to run with.
Hmm.
So it is an interesting life being in this and trying to break your way in from the outside. Like I love blending of things, like of art forms and things like that. And just what you were saying with the digital art reminded me of a while ago. My wife and I went to an art show at a gallery that we are patrons of, and they had a wine pairing, a old world and new world red, white, and rosé and sparkling, and
Okay.
they compared it to a old world and new world forms of artwork. So they had old world
Hmm.
photography with found art digital scan photography, and they
Okay.
had old world paintings with new world kind of abstract paintings. So each piece of art, so the old world wine would be paired up with one of the old, like the photography and new world, they would match off. So they did four different forms of art and four different wines, and it was just a really nice compare and contrast of thinking about the reflection of how the wine has changed over the years and how the art has changed over the years,
Hmm.
and flavors and palettes for both change so much over the period of time. So it's really cool to hear that digital art is being less kind of frowned upon and now being brought up.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm really glad about it too, because there's a lot of really cool tools. Like, I mean, I use Procreate, so that's obviously my favorite, but there's so many beyond that that are just so fascinating, especially with like 3D rendering and stuff like that, that once they're sort of allowed in the fine art world, like completely, I think we'll see some really cool stuff.
I think so. And that's some stuff that I'm really excited for. Now, how do you think AI is going to factor into this?
Oh gosh. I really don't know. It's it's tough. Like, oh. I don't know, a lot of people are kind of into this new Facebook meta idea with like him creating these different worlds and people wanting to sign up. And I just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Wasn't
think
there a
I
movie
think
about that?
people will find meaning from it and it will be valuable to them in that sense. And some people won't find meaning in it and it won't matter to them in some sense. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
And there'll be those that fear it. Well, it's the same thing that we have in the writing world. There's AI are now writing books and scripts and stories, and they're not very good. Like, but I mean, they're able to do something, right? Like, it's progressing forward, and it's going to be interesting, I think, down the road to see how the art world in general, like all forms of art, including music and sculpting and all that stuff, change with the increasing of technology and artificial intelligence and understanding of how things function and stuff, and growing artificial brains and that kind of stuff will be an
Yeah.
intriguing aspect of it.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a really wild next, I'd say 10 to 30 years. Like, I really feel like anything could happen. Like, after 2020, I feel like anything is possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's like we're talking about, because we had a brief conversation yesterday, and I was saying that I've always been an advocate for a guaranteed minimum income because
Mhm.
of a variety of different reasons beyond the fact that, well, hey, we all deserve to eat and have a roof over our heads.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I think that this COVID has shown us, this pandemic has shown us that people aren't just going to lay about and do nothing when there's income that's coming in. They may not be going and working in service industry jobs or the other jobs that people want them working in, but they're like Twitch has blown up, creativity has blown up, all this stuff has really, people are taking risks, people are starting off on their own path, doing their own thing. And I've
Yeah.
always said for years now that if there was a guaranteed minimum income, we would enter into a golden age of creativity. We would go
Yeah.
back to like musical, like more music being written, more artwork. It would just be so exciting to see the creativity that would come out of this, and back to bartering and communal dining, maybe not communal dining now with COVID, but bartering and with like being more connected with each other, because when you take away the stress from people and give them a chance to breathe, it's amazing what people can come up with.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, like, I hope more countries are able to adopt something like that. That would be one, I think, one avenue to keep economies and societies moving forward while we transition into whatever is the next iteration of our civilization. But yeah, I think people with COVID and the pandemic, I mean, for me, I felt like there was two things that I just kept thinking about. And one was like, this government is not prepared to handle taking care of humanity. They're just not. Like I'm in the United States, so obviously that felt very obvious for me.
Yeah.
But I think in some other countries too, a lot of people feel like, the people who are in charge are not willing and or capable to make the decisions necessary to kind of guide us into this next path. And then the other thing I kept thinking about was like, is is this 40 to 60 hour work week where I'm shuttling my kid to daycare like at super early in the morning and picking her up late at night, trying to go grocery shopping in the 30 minutes I have before I need to make dinner and do bedtime. Like, is this the life that I want? Is this the meaningful life that, is valuable to me? And I think at least for us, for my husband and I, and the little bit of savings we had, I kind of just decided like it's not, and I think a lot of people realize that they're like, yeah, no, there's other ways to live more sustainably, and I'm just going to try it. And if I fail, I fail, and whatever, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it, because we're hearing the news all the time where people are like, well, no one wants to work anymore. They just want to collect government money and just sit and not do any work. And no one wants to go back, and like all these services are suffering. A part of it, I think, is the fact that people have found, like you said, they found happiness. They found ways to survive and subsist, and ways to, I mean, even if you are on some kind of government assistance, that's not as much as you were making before generally.
Yeah,
And you
no.
need to survive. But in some instances, it is more than you made. And I think that's the thing, is that this opened up a lot of eyes. And there's a lot of people of like, you know what? I'm worth more
Yeah.
than being screamed at for $7 an hour while I serve people at a restaurant table. My
Yeah. And we
happiness,
are.
my freedom is worth more than that. So it's not just a matter of, or you know what, like I always wanted to take this risk. Now I've been given this opportunity. I'm taking the risk, and I'm not going to go back because I found something else. So it's not just people wanting to live off the government. I think it's people waking up to find their value and find
Yeah.
themselves and move forward.
I completely agree. I mean, and I love Twitch for that reason. I was not expecting to find such a warm community on Twitch. My husband actually recommended that I start streaming because he thinks I'm like, a super talented artist and I have a lot to share with people and he thinks that's valuable. And so after, a month or so, I was like reluctantly like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So, might as well give it a shot because we're in lockdown. And I was really pleasantly surprised to find that there is a community of people who want to talk to artists and writers and want to talk to creative people and who have very similar ideas to what creative people have and just want a safe place to go to that's not like, Twitter and Instagram and work to talk about these things. And it's really, yeah, it's become meaningful in a very different way than I had anticipated, which is really great.
Yeah, that's something that I found. And hello, Mercedes, by the way. Welcome. How are you?
Hi.
And yeah, the gaming world, I think a lot of the things that are involved in the arts or creativity, and I include gaming in that as well, is kind of suffering from the same issues with that. But yeah, I found the same thing with Twitch. I wasn't sure how many people were going to want to watch me come on and talk about writing or watch me write. And not only did I find that, yes, people actually were interested in that, they were also interested in just building a community and building, like, that's the thing, is I think partially because of lockdown and just in general, like there's a connection that's made, and that's what I wasn't expecting was the actual, like, even though we're separated by screens and separated, like, for the most part, most of the people in my chat I have never seen or met before in my life. But there's a solid connection and we know about each other.
Yeah.
And it's not like television where you've got these people that become like fans of an actor or an actress doing something in a movie or in a television show, and it's all one way. This way, like, I've actually got people sharing with me their lives and I'm sharing my life. And that's where it's a unique thing that's been built here.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think we've all had enough time to realize that we're looking for connection, we're looking for community. And I think everyone's kind of like, I don't, at least for me, I feel like the jig is kind of like up with capitalism. I feel like we've all grown up in the society where capitalism has told us that, like, oh, like if you're feeling sad, go to this wellness thing that costs this much money. Or if you don't feel beautiful enough, buy this makeup or do this thing. Or if you take this workshop, you're going to be so much smarter, and it's like, I feel like we've all been convinced for most of our lives that, like, there's all these things we can purchase to make us feel fulfilled and make us feel valuable, make us feel needed and wanted. And I feel like, I don't know, the jig is kind of up. Like, I feel like, I played into that so hardcore. I had like the corporate job. I bought all the things I was supposed to buy. I still felt like shit. And like, it means something that, like, now I'm pretty broke, but I feel so much happier and I feel like my life is more valuable. And I think that is telling.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like, I used to spend time in Cuba and not on a resort, like actually in one of the small towns. And
Mhm.
there's this one family I know there that had nothing. They were really, really just like poor financially. But I mean, they had food, they had a roof over their head, they had what they needed. And every time I would go and visit them, I would like, leave with like armloads of stuff. Like with like
Yeah.
plantains and mangoes and coconuts and just other stuff they had like from their backyard and just whatever they had made. And like they didn't have much, but whatever they had, they threw at you, and they were
Mhm.
just like the friendliest, happiest people that I ever came across. And it was because they weren't chasing the next thing.
Yeah.
They knew what their life was and they enjoyed it.
And it's exactly. I think, like, also too, like, I like, again, and I'm because I'm from the US, it's very like, it's very programmed into you that you have to go out in the world and become this like fucking genius or whatever, pardon my language. But then it's like, that's not, it's not fulfilling, it's not, I think people just, and it's fulfilling for some people, but it's, it feels kind of like a scam sometimes. And I don't know. At least that's what I feel like based on my experience. I feel like I went hard. I went for it. I got promoted a lot. I had a six-figure job. I did the things I was supposed to, and I just, it didn't land the way that I was sold.
Well, that's it. And that's actually Mercedes' famous screenwriter was just in chat saying that she can relate to everything you just said. And we know each other, we've had conversations, and that's the same thing. Is that I know Mercedes has also worked in writing rooms for some very interesting television programs, and realized that that just wasn't the thing, and is now off doing her own thing, right? Like you're doing, like I'm doing, and it's
Yeah,
fantastic. Like,
totally.
and it's amazing how many people I've met that are doing their own thing and loving it, even though that's a bit of a struggle sometimes, or a lot of the time. That has been really triggered with this. And I think that's something that you said earlier really is true, in that we are entering into a new, not a new way of life, but like our, for lack of a better term, our way of life, our, the way the world runs is shifting. It's almost
Yeah.
like going from, like going through the Industrial Revolution where everything changed. And I think
Hmm.
we're at that point now. We're at a catalyst point, and I think that's where there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of poor people. There's a lot of or poverty, a lot of food issues, and obviously there's
Yeah.
climate change and all that stuff. But there is this massive shift, and if you look at it, it is kind of going from another energy revolution, going from coal and gas and nuclear to greener technologies, and
Hmm.
so maybe there's something with to do with the energy, like not actually the
I,
energy of the world, but actually energy that's causing this societal change that we're going through.
I think so. I think there's an urgency now than there wasn't that there hasn't been. I think COVID was an eye opener, but also like with climate change, it's like we don't have limitless time. So I think especially that's another thing I was thinking about too. Like, gosh, like I don't know what's going to go on. Am I really going to spend the rest of my life working for some company that I hate? Like that's no,
Yeah.
I'm going to go all in. And I think it's a really I think that we're in a moment where a lot of people are just like, I'm going to go for broke and just do what I can because, like, how do people want to spend their time on this planet?
Exactly. And that's the thing that I found, like with this, as many of you in chat know, I've got a 7-month-old daughter, and I work from home. I love every moment of it. I've been there, like I'm there to support my wife when she's on maternity leave. In Canada, we have 12 months of maternity leave.
Oh, that's
Excuse me.
nice.
Yeah. And so, but I've been able to be here for it all and do stuff from home, like do what I'm doing from home. And that's the thing, is that one of the things that made me take the plunge on Wax Seal Productions and get everything moving the way it's going is that I don't think I've got it in me, apart from the fact that I'm disabled and I'm limited in what I can do for work. I don't think I've got it in me to leave my daughter every day for 8 hours a day to go somewhere I'm not happy, where I'm not respected, where I'm not feeling fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming home like missing all of those things and all of that time. And that the other thing too is, here in where I live, daycare is about $1,900 a month.
Yeah,
And
that's
so that is, for example, if my wife and I were both working outside of the home, we would need two cars. So we need another car, which is another car payment, increased insurance, plus $1,900 a month for daycare, and other expenses that go on top of that are added in with daycare. So you're essentially, one of us is working to pay for us to work,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, totally. It
And so,
doesn't make any
yeah,
sense.
like you said, that whole capitalistic system, and like, it's okay, just give, like, to me, and it also seems kind of like, now that I'm a father, it seems kind of really bizarre to me that this system has worked as so far, as so well, as long as it has, that basically you're just telling new parents, be like, oh yeah, no, you need to go back into the system, give your child to a stranger, and just
Yeah.
you go do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and just
That
and just
baffles
pray
me.
that the people and just pray that the people that you found are decent, because you don't have enough time to really get to know them. You can't like take out the daycare lady to lunch 3 or 4 times until,
Exactly.
you find out all their secrets.
Yeah, but somehow it's this normalized thing where it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
give birth to another human being and then just give them to a stranger for 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, no, you're totally right. And I think, my husband does work full time, but he works from home. And that was another big reason why we're doing this push for me starting, my business with Twitch and whatnot, because like I also need to have the flexibility to drop everything. Like if my daughter gets sick overnight, like when you have another job and you're like beholden to someone else, that negatively impacts your career.
Yeah,
But like for me, it's like super easy for me to just tell my community, like, hey, this happened. And they're like, okay, take care of it. See you next time.
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
no
And that's
big
the
deal.
thing. Like for me, it's so long as work is done, it's done. Like I something I believe in, and with Wax Seal Productions, because there are people that will be coming in on the team eventually. One of the rules that I've already built in to the company is that lunch breaks are at minimum an hour and a half, because
Yeah.
that gives you an hour to do what you need to do, like to have your lunch, or half an hour to have your lunch, then an hour to do what you need to do. If you need to go to the bank, if you need to run to the store for something, if you need to go close your eyes for 45 minutes or an hour and get rejuvenated, I would much prefer to have people working in the afternoon focused because they've had a nap. They've gotten what that thing in the back of their head that they need to get done, and am I going to get out of work in time to go get this before it closes? That's not bothering them, and that
Yeah.
is so much more productive.
I love that. And I love that like when you starting your company and you have something like that, that you're building that into a policy, because stuff like that is what the current people who have businesses and really successful $1 million companies can't seem to understand. Like they'll give you all these like surveys about, oh, how to keep the employees happy, but nobody wants like, and they'll offer you like, oh, maybe, meditate or maybe do this. And they give you all these stupid ideas like that are meaningless. And it's like, no, you need to build into standards and operating procedures of your business of how to maintain people's happiness and wellness. Like, and I am glad that you're starting your own business, because I think that like the people who own the businesses now, like they're not going to like revamp their whole company and their whole organization. I think it really takes people like you and other people to start from scratch, build stuff into it at the beginning, and then just grow from there. So I love hearing something like that. I used to
Yeah.
write standard operating procedures all the time for my old jobs in corporate, and so I love hearing stuff like that.
Well, that's the thing. That's what it does need to be a standard. Like, and that's I was saying this to my wife yesterday, that I find it funny, but there's like certain rules that I've got built in that I've already got built in for myself that I follow.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, well, why do you have these rules in? I'm like, well, if I ever have staff and they say, why do I have to do this? And she's like, well, you're the boss. Why would they ask you that? I'm like, well, because people can ask questions. It's not
Yeah.
just like like you have to do what I say that you have to do. But there's the one guy in the States who I can't remember his name or his company, but I do remember that after paying his staff like a typical corporate America system, he gave them, and he was making fist loads of money, just
Yeah.
wild amounts of money. So he ended up paying everybody in his company, even down to the janitor, got paid a minimum of 75,000 a year.
That's amazing. I think I know. I've heard about that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and productivity went through the roof. Like the sales went, like they started making more money than he had ever made before. Because again, when people aren't stressed, how can you focus at work if you're thinking about how you're going to pay your mortgage or how you're going to feed your kids tomorrow or tonight, right? So if
Yeah.
you take that financial strain away, it's amazing how people can bloom.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like the people at the top already know this and are just being willfully ignorant. Like they like you're not going to get someone's best work when you're like sucking them dry. They need to sleep, they need to rest, and
Yeah,
they need to be able to feel like they're valuable and their work matters. And they're not going to feel that way if they have, 5 minutes to eat lunch because they needed to go to the bank to deposit the check to pay their rent on the same day because they don't have enough money in their bank account, like
exactly. Or the same,
I've been there. It's stressful.
it is. And part of that stress is also the thing that drives me absolutely wild about the capitalist society is the 2% growth year over year. You don't have to grow by 2% every single year.
I actually think we should stop growing in that way. I think
Yes.
that if everybody were to just organically listen to what their bodies and their minds needed right now and just truly just listened, that like maybe the economy would not be as well, would not grow as fast, but we would slow everything down, slow climate change down, slow all of this terrible shit happening
All the
down.
trash, all that stuff. Like that's something that my wife and
Rest.
I do often. And I'm going to flip to chat in just a second, but there's something my wife and I do often, and like go into here we have stores like Canadian Tire, or there's Walmart, or there's Costco or super centers, any like major grocery store, department store, sorry, in your city, and honestly go into a Walmart, that they're everywhere, and open your eyes and look around at how much stuff is in there,
It's too
how
much.
much repetition of stuff, how many travel mugs, how many bags, how many lunch bags, just how much actual stuff is in there. And you realize not all of that is going to get sold.
And
And
not only that, we don't need it.
yeah, that's it. And that's just one store, right? And
Yeah.
there's just so much overproduction of stuff. And yeah, so I agree with you. Like being able to just hit the brakes a little bit and let things just kind of organically come in, like let things breathe. Like Mercedes
Yeah.
said, stop stressing me out, and I'll get my job done better. But you're
Absolutely.
right. Yeah, you're right, Quinn. People, things are changing. People at the top are getting scared, and it's I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see how this comes through. But your family is Laura or Quinn. Your family is dedicated people. Me, your mom, and that basically babysit the 5 children of the family. There are times where we have about 5 children around watching them. That's a lot of work. I can appreciate that now. Morality, ethics, and standards are some of the things that are more popular in corporations. And that guy, yeah, everyone did call him a socialist and crazy, but he kept growing and growing. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's all those points are right. And Mercedes was just saying that you should totally fell into that trap as a business owner. Just keep grinding and grinding and grinding instead of being happy with where you are and listening to yourself. If you're listening to what
Mm-hmm.
everyone else you should be doing with your business, once you started listening to yourself and found Twitch, started streaming, it's organic. And that's the thing; it is so much better. And that's the thing for myself. Like I find, I never work harder than I do for when I'm working for myself, because you need. I'm always a hard worker, but I actually have to like convince myself to punch the clock, to stop working, to put it away, to not just go back and do that one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm passionate about it. I love it. I love what I'm doing. I love growing and moving
Yeah.
forward and that kind of stuff. And but so for me, getting the work done isn't a problem because, like you were saying with your art in the beginning, where like it needs to get done and I enjoy what I'm doing, so I do it. But there's like today where it was Remembrance Day. I took the morning off and I was going to work all afternoon, but then I realized that there's some other stuff I needed to do, and my daughter woke up not feeling well this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I did like I think an hour and a half, 2 hours of work today,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll get made up. Like I'm not concerned about that, but being able to have
Yeah.
that flexibility, being able to wake up and say, no, I'm going to take today off out of respect, and then when the day kind of didn't go the way I anticipated, to be able to have that flexibility to say, you know what, I'm going to stop and
Yeah.
deal with what I need to deal with.
And
Right.
that's also super important. Like I was thinking when it comes to having kids too, I kind of had this thought because I had a lot of trauma growing up as a kid. So like being a parent was something I was very anxious about. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do a good job? But the decisions that we make, like as parents, like it's not only going to affect your child just in that moment, like they're going to in their subconscious remember that when people are not feeling well, it's time to stop and it's time to slow down and it's time to rest. And that's valuable and that's important because that's something that I feel like society doesn't always communicate. Like it's not common knowledge. A lot of people just work through being sick. And I think that like it's great to hear that, you stopped for your kid to do that because,
Yeah.
you know, that's what should be done. Like and we all have to realize that that's valuable and worthy of doing.
That is, and I think that's the thing that helps. That actually builds success because again,
Yeah.
building up with mental health really helps for that. But it is a challenge to go down this road. And why is this doing this to me? One moment.
Yeah, can't pour
Yeah.
from an empty cup. Absolutely, Mercedes.
Yes, that's exactly it. You got to take breaks, and you have to do what you need to do. But again, you also can't get so fixated on the end prize that you're letting everything else fall apart in life. Like it's all about balance, and I think it's easier to have balance when you're the one that's kind of calling the shots. And when you're the kind of
Oh,
person that believes in balance, you'll give that to people that are working with you.
yeah. I really struggled in the very beginning when I started this whole Twitch thing of making time to do the work for myself because I was so used to doing work for others. And in order to do so much work for others, I really had to like gain this mentality of like, oh, well, I shouldn't stop and eat lunch because I don't need to take care of myself in this moment. I can just push through it. I had made a lot of sacrifices like to my own mental health and well-being that when I first started trying to do Twitch and to run like and start my own business, I was very like, oh, but like who am I? Like I'm not that valuable. Like what do I have to say? Like so I think that like I'm glad to hear that you've been very successful, but like I had like the opposite experience. Now after it's been like a year, I feel much better and it's easy for me to like get started and do everything I'm supposed to. But definitely at the beginning, I was just kind of like I don't know. I'm not doing anything cool. Why should I spend this time? Like it's
Oh
hard to
yeah,
kind of believe in yourself. It takes practice to believe in yourself, I guess is what I'm saying.
it does, and there's still the imposter syndrome that's there. And it's funny because my chat will tell you that my fellow scribes, when I first started, I came in, I was still in the classical music world, and everything was timed and perfect and bang on and everything. So when I first started streaming, I came in with that mentality. So
Mm.
I was strict on things. I was like very everything had to be timed perfectly. I had like a strict schedule that I was following, and then over time I realized that that was too much, and I was able to relax and let go. But from where I started to where I am now, it was like, I mean, when I first started, I was wearing dress shirts every time I was
Nice.
on stream. It was like
Go
I
for it.
had
Just
that
go all the
mentality.
way.
Yeah, and now I mean, it's still professional, but
Yeah.
it's a lot more relaxed and a lot more who I am. I mean, it's a writing stream.
Yeah.
People aren't coming in for, typically they're not coming in for stock advice. We do talk about stocks once in a while, but mainly we're talking about writing.
GME to the moon.
Yeah, it takes practice to believe in yourself. It does, and it's something that's always ongoing.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing, and that was, I said on stream a couple of days ago. I had a very cathartic walk a little while ago, and I was able to break through some mental barriers, break through some stuff I was dealing with and feeling, and
Well,
I really knocked a lot of stress down, and it
that's
allowed me
great.
to get past a little bit of the imposter syndrome and the difficulty believing in myself, and
Hmm.
so it is important to take those times for yourself. But I also want to talk to you about, so your artwork that you do
Yeah.
is, so we've talked about how we've got to this point. My hair is not behaving today. It's just wild.
No, it looks good. It looks good.
Thanks.
It's doing a cool thing.
Yeah, there's actually this one side. It's always either like straight or trying to wrap itself in curls. So your work is based on papel picado. Can you
Yeah.
explain first off what that is and how you've
Sure.
incorporated it in? Because it's a really cool story of how like you've able to incorporate this into like almost all that you do, which is really neat.
Yeah. So it's definitely not the first thing that came to my mind when I first started making art. I started making drawings that were of papel picado. So papel picado are like they're technically like Mexican banners that you hang at parties. And if you've seen the movie Coco, you've seen them like in the whole intro. They are they're from indigenous cultures in Mexico, and they are sold throughout Mexico and whatever. They're mainly just meant for parties, and they're also used on altars for Dia de Muertas because the when they move over the altar, it's like almost like in Mexican culture, that's kind of like a signal that the spirits have arrived because the papel picado is moving. So it's a cultural symbol. But I came to it actually maybe it was about in 2017. I actually had a miscarriage at the time, and I was really thinking about what was essential in my life and what felt important to continue in my life. And I kept coming back to this symbol. And what I liked about it was that not only did it have this sort of cultural significance for me, but physically as a symbol, it requires you to cut pieces out in order to hang it and celebrate joy. And so I thought that was such an interesting dichotomy between a symbol that represents joy but requires pain to create it. And so that was really kind of like something that I was thinking about a lot when I was thinking about the symbol. And I was just doing a lot more drawing with it. And now it's kind of evolved into this whole process where I will make a lot of drawings, I'll cut it out, and then I'll stage it in kind of like still lifes, and I'll take photos of it. And then from those photos, I'll make additional drawings, watercolors, and acrylic paintings. And I have an acrylic painting back here, so you can kind of see that there's a piece of papel picado that's kind of floating. And the papel picado says stop and to listen. And that kind of just harks back to earlier when I was saying I really feel people should just stop and listen to what their bodies and what their minds need. But yeah, so it's like, a whole process I'm working on. I'm doing a 2-week painting intensive to try to get some paintings done. I have an art show in March. It's my first solo show, so I'm super excited about it. And it's the first time I'm also showing these paintings as a whole body of work of 21 works of art. I have 7 drawings, 7 watercolors, 7 acrylic paintings. And yeah, I mean, I started making it 2017, and it's the show will be in 2022. So that just goes to show you that like sometimes it takes 5 years for an idea to reach its full, potential. And I have ideas for the next body of work. So it's been a journey for sure, but I like the symbol. I think it's honest and gives me a place to put all the dark things that, need to be included in the conversation.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting that. And so this makes me feel less bad that my psychological thriller novel has been in second form of revision for 3 or 4 years right now. So
Yeah, you're good. You still have
see,
like a year and a half,
yeah, it
two
takes.
years.
It's not just writers, chat. See, it's not just writers that take time to get their
No.
stuff out there,
Yeah.
but it's better to have it done properly and have a cohesive idea behind it.
Yeah.
So
And it's
congratulations
such,
on your show. That's fantastic.
thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
That's great.
Um,
So I'm sure if it's coming up in March, I'm sure there's not a lot to promote about it yet, but you've already given us kind of a teaser for it. So I've
mhm.
put up in chat the guest command that allows you all to follow everything that Mermaid does. And it's like we have like an approved version of stalking now.
Yeah, right. It is, but it's kind of cool because let's be honest, we all want to know about each other.
Yeah, that's it. And but this will allow you to know when the announce. So this is the pre-announcement, pre-promotion announcement. When it does come,
Yeah,
if you follow those links, when the announcement does come, then you'll be among the first to know what's going on with all this awesome artwork.
definitely.
So what's going on with the comic book that you're working on? So are you doing the drawing for like another story, or are you doing the story and the comic together? Like what's?
I
I know that
I
there's a comic, but I don't know fully what's going on with it.
The comic is definitely another 5 year project. I am embracing that because I've always been a fan of comics. I wouldn't call myself like an aficionado because my husband has read every comic book known to man. So I don't feel comfortable saying that. But the comic is a story about a woman from the future who is tasked to help previous versions of herself in the past to grow and develop and to kind of be the best versions of themselves so they can eventually evolve into what the future is. It's based on a series of dreams that I had, and I'm doing the writing and I'm doing the drawing myself. But kind of like what you were talking about earlier, and some struggles. I've gotten it to a certain point with like the drawing and the writing, and I'm hitting this kind of wall because I think my original vision for what it was supposed to be is needs to change in some way, and I'm not sure what that is yet. So I'm taking some time to do some writing, but there is going to be some more comic book intensives coming, I would say in February at the latest, on Twitch, where
Nice.
I'll probably focus like 2 or 3 weeks of just working on the comic.
That's awesome because the artwork looks amazing, and that is yeah, Mercedes, you're right. That is a very dope storyline. Like that's an awesome idea, and like redeveloping yourself and to develop to who you are in the future. Like that's really cool. But the thing is with it too, though, is yeah, it's frightening. That's what I was saying with the Lion of Archinomus, where I had the relationship of the two main characters going in one direction, and now it's completely altered itself in the writing to this point. And at first it bothered me, but now I'm just kind of flowing with it to see what's going to go because your characters oftentimes dictate what's happening, and they do things that you don't
Yeah.
expect them to do, which is exciting. That's part of the fun of. That's why actually one of the reasons why I've got the moniker the Calm Scribe, is because I tend to talk to my characters in my head and check in with them and see what's going on, and they tell me the stories and I just write them down. So I'm just a
Oh, that's
scribe for the
cool.
characters in my head.
I love that. I love that so much. I think, and I appreciate you sharing that too, because I feel like the way that ideas come to human beings can be so bizarre. And I love when people are just honest about where ideas come from, because like, you know, I don't know, instead of just imagining that there's this like this genius pool that you're just tapping from, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I just thought of this. It's
Well,
cool.
for me, actually, a big part of my creativity comes from anxiety. So I started writing again after my accident, and it was a way to get the noise out of my head. And so what ended up happening is I've always said that if anxiety were personified, it would be a wrinkled old man, shriveled over a cane, with a long white beard, walking around, trembling, with blue watery eyes, constantly saying, "What if?"
Yeah, that's accurate.
And he lives in my head. But that was the thing. I would get into these anxious moments of, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And I'd get into those patterns of building out entire scenarios that are never going to happen in 100,000 years. But I
Yeah.
would carry myself through these really stressful scenarios and just go into really dark places and bad places. And that's where I started flipping things to what if The one of the story that I don't talk about much because it's still deeply in the works is called the Extinction Protocol, and it's about how the human race goes extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is nature attacking. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because I was having a really anxious moment, and I was driving the car with my wife, and had my head against the window, and I was looking out trying to calm a panic attack. So I saw the
Mm-hmm.
grass going past, and I thought, what if I was going through the what ifs, and I thought, you know what, stop. What if the grass were to suddenly become sentient and attack us?
Mm-hmm.
And just that one thought triggered this whole concept. And then I said, well, okay, well, what if this happened? And what if? So I was taking the what ifs of the anxiety and turning them into hypotheticals that developed into a story.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
often what I do
awesome.
now for my short stories and stuff is just use that what if, if you're walking down the street and you feel anxious and like, well, what if I get attacked? Well, what if you don't? What if this happens?
Yeah,
And build it out into something else.
I love that. That's a really creative and positive way to handle the anxiety. And I'm going to try to remember that next time I have a panic attack about the what ifs. I'm going to think about your story.
Yeah, it works. It does. It helps. It's
Mhm.
it's a great way of kind of dealing with things that you're dealing with. But I'm
Yeah.
really interested to see how this comic book plays out. It kind of
Mhm.
reminds me of. Well, thank you, Mercedes. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. There's a movie. Uh, I'm just blanking on it now. Well, there's one movie that does tie in, and that is the Run Lola Run. If you haven't seen that,
Oh, I
with
actually haven't seen Run Lola Run,
you
but
haven't
it's
seen
it's
it,
no, but I've seen all. I feel like there's a lot of like movies around that happened before and after that movie that like were really popular for some reason I've seen, but I can't. I should
yeah,
just watch that.
it,
That's
it
a
was.
classic movie.
It is a classic movie, and it's fantastic because it shows how just because it's one storyline that's repeated 6 or 7 times, and it's one change. So as she's running down the stairs to at one point, she runs into a group of nuns, and one time that she runs down the stairs and runs out the building and runs into the nuns, one of them is wearing sunglasses. And then
Hmm.
everything from that point in the story is slightly altered and slightly different because of that one change in what happened. And so
Yeah.
that's the same. So it's, the entire story is just different variations of the same story. Because you'll get to the end and say stop, and then go back to the beginning again, and something else will change, and that'll change the outcome of the story. So it's kind of
Yeah.
cool just to see like how it kind of plays with those concepts.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I do believe that though. I do think that like even one interaction with somebody else does alter things, and that gives me hope actually.
Yeah, it can, and for the positive and for the negative, and that's what I try to always remember, that when you're interacting with people every day, you don't know where they're coming from or what they've been through in that day.
Mhm.
And a negative word could be just the thing to send them off in a really bad place.
Yeah.
So I try to. There's a movie I like called Waking Life, and it's the concept of always, like when you're traveling, always be cognizant of where you left and where you're headed, or always be moving forward but never kind of leaving where you've been, keeping your roots, and be aware that
Yeah.
everyone else is going through these different things. We have a new chat. Vince Blake. Hello, how are you tonight? Welcome. Is this one of your crew coming through, Mermaid?
I
No?
don't know.
Ah, well, welcome, Blake. And. Or Vince Blake, yes. And Lord Master Quinn, took you months to complete. You missed all of that. You've been in and out. You'll have to watch the VOD. No problem, that's great. We're very great, Vince. Thank you. We're just
We're
in
good.
having a
Thanks.
conversation about art, life, creativity, and all the stuff that goes along with it.
Mhm.
And so you also do pinatas on stream.
Mhm.
And that ties in just, is that, how did you get into the pinatas for this as well?
I just always wanted to make piñatas, and I felt when I was in art school that it wasn't highbrow enough to do. And so when I started Twitch, I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna make piñatas. I've always liked them. I grew up having piñatas at birthday parties, going to many birthday parties with piñatas, and we used to go to Mexico. I actually grew up in San Diego County, so we used to go to Mexico often because things are cheaper there. And so we would drive down, and there's this really kind of magical spot when you're driving back up to get back into the United States, is that there's a lot of vendors because it takes a long time. You're like in your car and you have to wait for like 30 minutes to get back into the United States because they're, checking everybody to make sure that, illegal things aren't happening. And so you have all these vendors who are making different stuff and trying to sell it to you. And one of the things that they do is that they just make pinatas, and they'll be making pinatas. They have all these pinatas for sale, and they're always like half knockoff pinatas. They're like wannabe Mickey Mouse, Tweety pinatas, and they're just so bizarre. And I just love the energy of that. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna make some pinatas. Why not?
That is awesome. And I love the fact that you recognize it. You're like, it probably wasn't highbrow enough. And that's, again, with the gatekeeping, that only certain
Totally.
forms of art are like to be qualified as art.
Yeah. But I'm over that now. I
That's
just
good.
do whatever I want now.
Being on Twitch has made you realize how alike content creators truly are. Most of the ones you've spoken to can relate to the same things. Yeah.
Yeah.
The knockoff pinata is your favorite.
They're, they just have such a unique quality, the knockoff pinatas.
I love knockoff things. I've got a dish towel in my kitchen that just
Mhm.
says like, it's supposed to have like a motivational cooking quote on it, but it just says eat food, cook, yum, eat good. And I'm like, this is the greatest motivational cooking towel I've ever seen. I have to buy it.
That's awesome.
So that's the thing. But one thing that we do on the Column Scribe in the with the writers chat with the Column Scribe is we do the first Thursday of every month is we do movie night,
Mhm.
and we watch classic films on stream, and we break down the writing, and so we tend to watch them like in silence, but we'll break down the writing and the dialogue and the content and all that stuff and outlining and storylines and stuff afterwards. But that's something you do as well. I know for at least in October, you were watching every night you streamed, you were watching a different horror movie.
Yep.
And you're also another horror buff.
I love horror movies. I think it's one of the few genres of film that is super honest about the depravity and bizarre likeness of just being a human being.
Yeah. Is there like a particular genre of horror that you like? You're like a slasher fic or a
Oh gosh.
psychological or
You
um,
know, I appreciate different types for different reasons. I would say the only thing I'm not into is torture. I'm not into torture, and I'm not into anything that's uh like I'm not into human centipede type stuff. That's not my jam. But I will say I love Korean horror. I love Japanese horror.
other
I love
masters.
yeah, I love I do like some sort of classic American horror. I think it was kind of the beginning of the genre in many ways, but a lot of the horror movies that come out in the United States I'm not the biggest fan of. Um and I like what other are my favorites? Also one that I showed that was kind of like blew people's minds was a little otic. This was like I believe it was like a Czechoslovakian film, and it's about like this woman who adopts this tree stump, and the tree stump turns into like this baby because she lost her baby, and then she like it like turns into a baby, and she's like nursing it and feeding it, but then it turns into this monster that like eats people and like kills everyone. So I don't know, weird
Wow.
stuff. I'm just into stuff that's like super weird that you
Yeah.
could never even imagine on your own. I think it's just scratches at like the parameters of like your sane mind, and
Well, that's
that's
the
a
best stuff
nice
to have.
feeling.
Like, have you seen the movie Rubber?
Mm-mm.
It's about a serial killer tire.
Oh, actually, yes, I have seen
Yeah,
that.
I think it's called
Yes,
Rubber. I think it's called
yes.
that. But with the whole, because I just agreed with you. The Korean, the Japanese, for variations of the like horror stories are terrifying, and they're really well done and are really awesome. Like I said, they're kind of masters of horror. But I think there's another reason for that too, and that's in the writing world. You can see a few of them on the board behind me here. Here, but there's like more than eight, but there's eight core kind of story outline functions that we use, like Freytag's Pyramid, the hero's journey, the monomyth, and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And they're very well known here. And most stories are kind of built off of those or some variation of within those.
Hmm.
In Asian storytelling, they use different storytelling models. They don't have the
Hmm.
same outlines, and they don't tell stories in the same structure that we do. So if you look like a manga story outline, it's totally structured totally differently than like you would typically do with the hero's journey here. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of those things that makes it jump out at us so much is that it's not the same. It's not even formulaic, but just the stuff that we've grown up on that we've seen all the time. It's like eating a different dish from another country.
Yeah.
It's you're being exposed to something new and exciting, and it's your brain can't predict what's going to happen next.
Yeah, exactly. I love one of my favorite directors is Takashi Miike. He's just like so like his films are so depraved and just bizarre and have like I don't know. They have weird stuff. I don't want to go into it, but it is just like it's super weird and interesting. My favorite horror movie, I have two favorite horror movies. One is this one called Houseu, and it's this like 1976 Japanese horror film where it's like these seven like teenage girls go to visit one of their aunts, but their aunts actually like she's found the Fountain of Youth, and the Fountain of Youth is like eating children. So she slowly picks them off one by one and like eats them, and it's like has all this like 70s pizzazz and pop culture type like coloring.
Awesome.
So it's like super bright, and the music is hilarious, and the special effects are horrible, and it's amazing. It's not scary, but it's hilarious. And then the other film that was my favorite is The Shining. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Even though it got shit on when it first came out, but like I think there's a lot of subtext and a lot of things going on that like I don't know. I think it's aging well in my opinion.
Yeah.
I could watch The Shining like 20 times and be happy.
Oh, I think that, yeah, I agree. The Shining is fantastic. If you're into those kind of movies, there's another one that I absolutely love, and it was my chat that actually pulled it together. And I'm going to we'll respond to chat in just a moment. But there's this movie I saw late night one night on TVO at this public access network here in Canada, and it was with help of chat I came to find out it was called Alice, and it was I think a Danish retelling of Alice in Wonderland. It is one of the trippiest versions of Alice in Wonderland, which was already written on drugs. This one is just beyond. It was done in 1984.
Did it have stop animation in it?
Kind of, yeah. So there was like the stuffed animal, like the white rabbit was stuffed with sawdust, and it was constantly spilling out of his stomach. So every once in a while he was always gathering it, and then he would stop and put it in a bowl and eat it like porridge, and then start running, and then the stuffing would fall out of his stomach again. But Alice was played as an actual little girl, but she was also played as a doll. Like there's a stop motion doll that was in it, and the rats and skulls and stuff.
Yes, that's by Jan Spankmeyer. I love Jan Spankmeyer. He also has this really weird one that's not like a horror movie. That's like it's like weird sex machines, and it's like I don't know. It's bizarre. He makes weird stuff. You should look up all the stuff he's
I'll have to look it up because it is pretty like that. I saw that at like 2:00 in the morning, and I was half asleep. I didn't know what I was looking at. I just remembered Alice crying and the room filling up with water, and then a rat rowing up in a rowboat, climbing on top of her head, stirring her hair into a mess, lighting it on fire, and then driving a spike into her head and pitching a tent, and then cooking hot dogs.
Amazing, yeah.
I'm like, I need to find out what this is. But
it.
this was like in the 90s, in like late night television, like 2:00 in the morning, and I had no point of reference as to what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you type in chat, or are you able to type in chat just what that person's name is? The name of the movie is Alice. I think it was 1984 that it was created. But I definitely have to check out that again.
Yeah, the director, and his name is Jan Spunkmeyer. He's amazing. There was a really good show that had a lot of his stop animation sets in New York City 5 or 6 years ago. My husband and I went to. It was really cool.
Nice. I would have loved to see that. But so, chat, ask her about Candyman and why he lives in a mirror killing artists with bees. Because why wouldn't he live in a mirror? Darius wants to know about the Candyman and why he lives in mirrors killing artists with bees.
I actually haven't seen Candyman. I need to see it.
Way to ruin it, Darius.
I didn't hear anything. La la la. I think I've seen VHS though. I think someone asked about VHS.
VHS, yes. VHS, I've seen. I don't remember it, but I have seen it. I'm glad you're doing Trey's Darius. That's awesome. Yeah, Vince, I agree. The Saw is good, but the plot is kind of crazy. I was actually interested in the whole Purge movies franchise. I liked the first one. I thought it was kind of silly that they kept going on and on with them. But then I realized that they're actually leading up to a pivotal point, which turns the entire franchise on its head, which is this movie that they just released.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
maybe I'll watch it then, because I was kind of poo-pooing the Purge. I was like, whatever, the Purge.
Yeah, it's a cool
Killing a bunch
idea.
of people, it's just like,
Yeah, but then it progressed, and it got to the point that they would like kidnap a politician or a police chief. And then, so it's just getting kind of more organized. And then in this latest one, they go in and they take over all the governments, all the police stations, and they take over the country and they make the Purge permanent.
Oh,
and
like
that's what
every
they've been
day?
leading. Yeah, that's what they've been leading to, is they overthrow all forms of authority and they take control of the country. and keep the purge
Wow.
constant. So that's the concept behind the new movie. So this whole thing, it wasn't just repeating the same story; it was building to this crescendo of. I
Oh,
know how
that's
good it is. I don't know, but it's caught my attention again.
I'll have to binge that then sometime because that's nice to know that it leads somewhere. I just assumed that The Purge was just like a one hit wonder and they just kept making the same movie over and over
See,
again.
that's what I thought, but it turns out it was something different.
Cool.
But yeah, VHS. Did you look that up?
That's let's see, created by Brad Miska.
So it was a good
Um,
concept. Bad education. Yeah, and Godzilla was a horror. And you're
I
right,
don't think I've
Quinn.
seen
It
this.
is very Eurocentric for a lot of stuff here.
Yeah,
The
I don't
Western
think
world
I've
really
seen
is.
VHS.
No, I don't remember it. Again, I've lost a lot of my memory from my accident.
Mhm.
Which is this stuff is kind of good because it helps me remind me of things that. Um,
Yeah, I don't remember it if I've seen it.
yes, it does. Yeah, I've seen it. I don't remember it though. Something I think I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch.
Mhm.
But Stephen King is the man. Yeah, Stephen King. I actually just joined a Stephen King Facebook page, and they made me jump through hoops. Like they asked, like all Facebook pages, like, oh yeah, like answer these questions so the admins can let you in. It's like, no, it's like, what is your favorite Stephen King novel that doesn't have a sequel? What is your favorite film adaptation that you think is most accurate to the books? I'm like, I didn't realize I have to pass an exam, like be like a
Jeez.
BA in Stephen King to get into this group.
God. Yeah, that's very serious. That's a serious Stephen King group. I love Stephen King too. The Stand is an excellent book.
Yes, that and
Super.
that's one of the books I loved actually was the a lot of people that I know haven't read it, but it's The Eyes of the Dragon, and it was Stephen
Mm.
King's foray into fantasy.
Oh, I haven't read that one. I should try it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's actually the main magician, the bad guy magician, is Flag from the Dark Tower.
Oh, I
So
love that
he
Stephen King
appears
does
back.
that.
Yeah, I do the same thing actually in all my writing, and not at all, but a lot of my writing, there's little connections to this same. Like a lot of it takes place in the same universe.
Oh, that's awesome.
Toy
That's so
Story
clever.
3, yeah, I stopped watching Toy Stories because my heart couldn't take them. Same reason why I still haven't watched Up. I'm way too
They're
soft-hearted.
traumatizing.
They are. It's like I hate that I have to watch all these. Like one of the ones that absolutely tears my heart out the most is Tarzan by Disney.
Oh God, no, I can't watch Tarzan. I'm just
Oh,
crying the whole
well,
time.
that's the same thing. Like I'm very soft. I cry at movies. I'm very soft-hearted, and I showed Tarzan to my wife. I'm like, the animation is superb. It's just so well done, and the
Yeah.
music and everything. The storyline is so well done, but it is just so heart wrenching. And then my wife was so in love with the film and angry at me for showing it to her. Because now she even hears the soundtrack, she starts crying because it's just so well done. But yeah, it's there's some movies where I'm just like I'm not going down that road. Though I will make my daughter watch Old Yeller. That
Oh,
is
really?
well,
I
I
don't
mean
know.
that's a rite of passage.
Old Yeller, so sad.
Yeah, no one talks about Old Yeller anymore.
Or Where the Red Fern Grows.
Yes,
Another
there's
sad book.
another one too that was bad. I haven't seen the live action Tarzan. No.
Bridge to Terabithia, another sad one.
Oh yeah, yeah. Bridge Therapy. That is definitely. Yeah, I know about that yogurt ad that you're talking about, Darius, and it's disturbing. It's not. That's not horror. That's just disturbing. Reread Misery. Yeah, there's. I'm gonna have to check out the live action. But yeah, it's just amazing how these stories impact, and that's one of the reasons why I love animation is because it's storytelling and artwork, like two of my passions that are put together, and if done, they're very like inseparable from each other.
Yeah.
And like Tarzan is one of those with that. Like they really kind of stick through to you and hit you at the core of your being. But the
Yeah.
animation was beautiful. I loved the way like that was Tarzan was one of the first times I think that Tarzan or Disney really broke the mold on how they did their animations.
Oh,
And
really? I
they
didn't know
started
that.
using new methods and new concepts. And
Oh,
the artist, I can't remember his name, but the key artist was a very dynamic, like he did a lot of dynamic poses. So instead of
yeah.
seeing the static, like you would see like in Disney's, like in Beauty and the Beast, where you see them dancing around the ballroom and was like,
Yeah.
they used computer animation for the ballroom and stuff. But for Tarzan was one of the first times they actually studied like surfers and skateboarders and these other people, and had all these really dynamic things of him like skating across the vines through the trees, and his feet like crossing over back and forth, and the way he would like swing through the trees and stuff was all just very, again, a dynamic form of animation of really using new angles and new captures and new concepts.
That's cool. I didn't know that. I love that though.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So, so you do have your art show coming up.
Hmm.
I think, I think we covered a lot of what we wanted to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I think we did a really good job.
I think we covered a lot of stuff. I do actually have because as people know, when we do this, when I do these shows, I do have a surprise question for my guests. Thank you,
Love it.
Mercedes. And so the surprise question I have for you is now, without getting too much into the weeds of like reality of the situation, which of all the horror monsters, classic or new or whatever one, which one would you love to spend an evening with the most? Considering that you're not going to be murdered, this is going to be just a chill session. You're hanging out. And what I mean, if like I like to have dinner and kind of hang out and just chill for the evening and chat about stuff. And what I mean, don't get too caught up in the semantics of it. Is like if it's Dracula, I'd be like, well, he drinks blood and whatever. But just which monster would you like to chill with?
Oh, which monster? Oh my gosh, this is such a hard question. There's so many good monsters. Um, you know what? I'm just gonna go with the one that first came to my mind. Maybe this is a bizarre one, but like there's this Spanish horror movie called Wreck, and it's like it's kind of like it's technically a zombie film. Um, and I loved the pacing of it. It's very slow and gets faster and faster as you get to the end. And I love it too because I hate when monsters are revealed too early. And this monster is revealed at the very end, and it's like this like anorexic like zombie woman, but like she's like was married. You learn a little bit about her story as everything happens, and I think I would want to meet her because I always, and sometimes this happens in horror movies where when you see the monster or you see the villain, there's like all these images everywhere of like these crazy drawings they're doing to make them look absolutely insane.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I would just like, like want to know about the crazy drawings and like just talk to her about that. And that I feel like that's a weird choice, but that's the first one that I thought of. So I'm just going to go with that one.
That makes complete sense. That's an awesome answer. I think for me, it would have to be either Pennywise from
Oh,
It.
yes.
I would love to he's just such an interesting character. I'd love to sit down with them. Or I would also love to spend time with a fairy. And then
Oh,
my background is Irish, and
mhm.
fairies aren't cute, friendly little things that flit around and grant wishes for you. They're mean, evil little
Yeah,
creatures
they're
that will chew your
dangerous.
face off. So I just love to know, like, sit down and chill with them and find out why they're such little monsters and how something so small is so absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that or a banshee. A banshee would be another. Because I'm a huge fan of horror movies as well, and
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it, I do recommend watching The Devil's Backbone.
The Devil's Backbone. Okay, let me
Yeah,
just put that in my search really quick so I don't forget. The Devil's Backbone.
it's by, if I'm not
Um,
mistaken, it's again by Guillermo del Toro, but it's in Spanish. And
oh,
so
okay, cool.
it's El Espinosa del Diablo,
Hmm.
and it's a fantastic horror movie that I think would be right up your alley, and it takes place during the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, love it. Yeah, no, I would love to watch it. That's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's not what you
Um,
expect. So
okay, cool. I'm gonna watch that. That reminds me of Pan's Labyrinth. That's another good one.
yeah, I'd love his
Monster with the
monsters.
monster with the eyes. That's a
Yes,
good
all of them. Like that's the thing. Like even the fawn was just so well. Like the sculpting of the fawn, the face being
one.
sculpted
Yeah,
into the horns, and I find
yeah.
his monsters are just next world because he's also did the monsters for Hellboy and for, if I'm not mistaken, the League of the Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Hmm. Oh, wow.
The character creations for those movies as well. If I'm not mistaken, he was part of them. Lord Master Quinn would do the Plague Doctor or the Hard to Kill Reptile from the SCP universe. It doesn't have to be a movie series; it's just a monster. And Darius would do Alien or the girl from The Ring, so he can pop through and snoop
The
on
girl
people's
from the
houses.
ring. I would not want to talk to her. Well,
Yeah,
I would talk to her if she would let me braid her hair so she was less scary.
yeah. But then you see that pale, like that pallid complexion, the white-bellied fish
No,
complexion.
no,
Again, the Japanese version, Ringu, was so much more terrifying.
I don't think I've seen that. I think I can't remember if I've seen Ringo. I think I was too scared to watch it. I think I
Yeah.
was like, I can't do this.
They have another one too that I can't remember the name of that came out I think after The Ring, and
Hmm.
I just remember a girl like being a nanny or a caretaker to this old man or something, and there's this the Grudge, the Grudge.
The Grudge. Yeah,
Yeah, it
Grudge
was
is
another
good.
one.
Do you know who the artist H.R. Geiger is?
Rings a bell.
He is the guy who did so he originally started doing a lot of drawing. I mean, he was an artist anyway, but there's an artist named his
Oh
last
yeah.
name is Jodorowsky. He was a Mexican artist and he wanted to make a version of Dune. And so he had all these artists he pulled. And one of the artists was Salvador Dali, and one of the artists was H.R. Geiger. And H.R. Geiger made all of these drawings for him and they were so amazing. The movie didn't end up getting made, but it ended up being like the foundation for the Alien series.
Yeah, that's I'm looking at it here now, and that's because that's the thing with me is with the accident I lost a lot of my memory, but if I can see something to trigger it, so yeah, I do know who H.R. Geiger is. I'm looking at the artwork again. Yeah, and the Alien, those are just absolutely
Yeah, he's an incredible artist. Love him.
yeah, the creativity behind some of this stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's that's I love art. I love that's the thing I love about art. I love about writing, baking, construction is you're creating something from nothing,
Hmm.
and it absolutely blows me away. And I'm always very you're disappointed Darude was in Dune. There you go. But I mean, I am an artist. Like I used to do painting, but not so much anymore. I'm now focusing on literary arts and stuff like that. And but whether it comes to composition, to game design, to visual arts, to writing all this stuff, even though I'm in that world, I'm always in so much awe of everyone else that I meet, that I come across that are doing these things.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to like just, learn more about what you're doing. I just love everything that you're doing and everything you've said about your company and like everything. It just sounds awesome and, that's just great. It's so great.
Yeah, it's great, and it's nice to see again. Like I think, like Mercedes said, and like we've been kind of been talking about tonight, is that it does seem there's a lot of creatives are kind of on the same wavelength, on the same page, and that's something that I like about Twitch is that honestly, I've been a part of different creative circles in my own city and in other cities, and been a part of different communities. But Twitch has been such a broad community. I've never in my life been surrounded by as much creativity and like just awesome ideas and concepts and different things that people are doing and different ways of like approaching life. And it's just Twitch has really opened this up where it's just this amazing creative community that's here. And I
Hmm.
think Twitch is in danger of us creatives taking over the video game platform.
Well, one can only hope.
We're pushing for it, and I think Twitch is recognizing that how this stuff is happening, and I think we're going to be getting a writing because we don't have a writing channel.
Oh, that's lame.
There's arts and creativity. So this writers channel that we're in now is actually some poor person's creation of a video game that at some point people just stopped playing, and we kind of hijacked the channel.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, there you go. You guys see you were creative and you found what you needed, but hopefully they make one for you on purpose.
they will. I actually know how to get that done now, and we're working towards doing that. Main thing being is that they don't want to have a bunch of channels that have nothing in it. They don't want to
Yeah.
have a whole series of channels that have like three people streaming with 10 viewers. So
Oh,
once you can,
gotcha.
so that's why a lot of us are using the writers channel now, is that the more we can get the viewers focused on one channel, have 15 people
Yeah.
streaming with 300 viewers, then Twitch will see that it's actually going to work and not look bad, and not because the other thing too is that it's not just looking bad on Twitch of having these things set up, but it's also bad for the streamers
Yeah.
because people are attracted to crowds, right? So if you see a
Hmm.
channel that's only got three people in it, you're not going to click on that channel generally.
Yeah. No,
Except
that's
for the
those are
fact
really
that it's a
cool.
niche market, so I think people still would. But, anyways, there's a path forward, so we'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for the follow, Mercedes. I appreciate it.
Yes, the creatives are taking over. someone made the Dune trailer with Darude. I'm gonna have to check that out most definitely. Well, thank you very much for the interview. I greatly enjoyed this. I'm gonna have to have you come back on sometime, maybe closer to March, to talk about your art show, before or
Oh,
after.
I would love that. Yeah, that sounds great.
And just yeah, that would be something. Right now, with the art show that's coming up, is there? Because immediately when you mentioned it, I just pictured in an art gallery and the typical art show that people do.
Mhm.
How is COVID impacting things? Is there now, for art shows and galleries, is there now a virtual component of this? Is this something that people would be able to take a virtual tour from like Canada and see your work, or do you have to be feet on the ground in New York?
Well, it doesn't say in my contract that I can't have a virtual version, so I plan on having a virtual option available. Whether that's me bringing my just my laptop in and live streaming the whole thing and just live streaming it on Twitch, I plan I plan on there being a virtual component. So it is more of a feet on the ground type of thing. It is in person, but a lot of my community, they want to check it out, and I want to give them that opportunity, so and I think I am doing like an artist talk at some point, and I want to live stream that as well so people can see that.
Nice. So you definitely have to let us know what's going on with that and come back and talk about those things.
Yeah, will do.
That's actually I'm working towards, now that things are opening up. I'm actually working towards creating a writing retreat for some of
Nice.
my fellow scribes on Twitch that can come, and we'll do a retreat together and do some writing in person. We do actually join right now. We meet every Thursday or every Tuesday on Zoom. Some of us, and the group is growing, and we do writing sessions for 2 hours together. So I actually do get to face with some of my chat once in a while, once a week.
That's awesome.
It's
I
really
love that.
exciting. Yeah, it brings it to a new level, and it's just nice to be able to. For me, it actually helps with my memory loss. It helps me to, once I've seen the face and I've talked to the person, it helps me remember when I see their name in chat what they're working on, what we've been working on together. And oh yes, and Darius wants to know what you think about NFTs.
Oh God, NFTs.
Darius is getting headlong into them and has actually been cracking along and doing really well with them. And he's been showing a lot of things, and like interesting things to me. I haven't had a chance to dig in and understand them fully, but it seems to be
Yeah.
a new way of decentralizing and using your art to make more money.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, to be honest. I mean, I'm giving it a little bit of time to like really see how it grows and how it develops. Um, I think what was really interesting about it is that it definitely makes you think about how do we assign value, and how do we give value a definition, and how do we move it from one place to another. And I think it's interesting that like the way that value is being attributed to something like an NFT um, is interesting to me. I'm paying attention to it, but I haven't made any. I have a couple people who would like me to make some, but I'm watching it still. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how it's going to go. I'm not sure if it's going to be like the Beanie Babies of the art world, like is this something that's going to last? But I also have read like maybe one serious article about it. So
And that's the thing
that's
with me.
I
Like
think that as well. I
Darius,
have not read a lot about it, but you know, that's what
uh,
I think.
I think that's the big thing. So Quinn, NFTs are non-fungible tokens, and I can't explain exactly how they function, but it's it is something that does seem to be interesting, and I'm going to look into it. Like you said, there, like I was saying earlier on stream too. It's not something that you can read a cursory article and be like, oh yeah, I know what this is, and run with it. I think a lot more research goes into it. I don't even know like how I would create it for writing, and Darius is becoming quite knowledgeable about it and sends me stuff on my Discord. So if you're interested about learning more about NFTs, Darius has posted stuff in the Discord for that.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, so it's something I'm going to look into. But I still have to launch my company's website because I've got the really terrible thing of starting a new company and becoming so busy with new contracts that I don't have time to launch it.
Yeah.
So that's something that it's a good problem to have, but you need to get past that because you need to be able to get more clients, right? You need to have something to actually show people who you are.
Yeah, totally.
The most profitable color in art is red.
Did you know that the first color human beings could see with their eyes was red?
Is it?
If you, it's like that's what anthropologists think. If you look at the Odyssey, which is one of the oldest stories ever told, the number of times that red and black and brown is used is like way more common than even yellow. And blue is only mentioned like a couple times, and green's only mentioned a handful of times. So they think that the way that color developed, red was the first color.
See, I mean just like from point of birth on, or from like evolution of
So just
human.
like a human like evolution, like from an evolutionary
Yeah,
standpoint, like the first color we could recognize or differentiate was red, probably like red and black.
that's probably from the vibrational frequency in the rods and cones in our eyes and how they pick it up. And
Hmm.
but that's the thing that I would actually find interesting, because I know there is a adaptation for humans, because humans are still evolving, and there is a I think it's relatively new, but an adaptation where people, if you've ever seen, being an artist, if you've ever seen a Monet painting, the
Hmm.
impressionism where the different colors, like because you would go at different times of day and paint the same scene, so you'd have those different overlaying colors.
Yeah.
So if you think of even like water lilies, there are people that actually see life like that. They've got a much broader spectrum of colors that they can see. So they can actually see more pastels and faded, like colors that exist that we can't see with our eyes.
Yeah.
Much the way like a dog sees in blue and yellow and can't see the rest. There are people that can now see more in-depth colors than normal people can see. And I wonder if that's not another, if that's just a fluke, or if that's something that we're going to develop into, that we can actually
I
begin
hope
seeing more
I
colors.
want to see more colors. I'm jealous of that. I want to be one of those people who can see more color.
Yeah. So that's the thing. And I think the other thing that's, it's funny because I was talking to my wife and I said that I think for whatever reason, I can't remember what my reasoning was, but I think long hands and long fingers are going to become a new adaptation for humans, where we're just going to have
Oh.
like obscenely long fingers and longer hands.
Hmm.
But I think it's because my reasoning for it was that we've got so much technology helping us with things, and like especially with the advancements of robotics and moving heavy things, that we don't have as much need of pure muscular strength, and we'll be getting more, especially if we go into more of an arts age. I think we'll be getting more into the dexterity will become more important to humans,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
especially if we're building machines, being able to get fingers into like smaller places and be more stable and more to have better dexterity.
Hmm.
And I saw shortly after I said that, we went to a restaurant and our server was actually like that. She was very tall and she had really long arms, and like her fingers were almost twice as long from what I've seen on normal people. Like they stood
Wow.
out as how long her hands and fingers were. And I was like, see, just like that. Like that's what's coming. So we'll see. There's an eye surgery that removes a particular lens that allows extended color perception.
Oh, really?
It's
Can I have one put in?
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound right. The lateral genetically nucleus in that is the lowest wavelength that would be the easiest to detect on the spectrum, like the predator. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Is that would be the vibrational frequency of that. Yeah, I don't know. There's also an eye surgery that you can do to get like camera implanted, and like you have one set of eyes.
I'm scared.
Yeah, I can't.
I'm too scared for even like LASIK or anything like that.
I
It's just
did
totally
LASIK.
safe, but I'm
Yeah,
scared.
I did LASIK. I didn't do the one where they cut your eye open. I did the one where they just buff off the outer layer, and then
Oh
it
wow.
heals back and grows over.
Oh.
So there's two. There's one where they cut the eye and they flip back a flap and they do it, and there's another one where there's like the inside of your mouth. There's that moisture layer. They just kind of buff that off painlessly, and do the
Wow.
lasers, and then we wear contact band-aids for 3 days, and that kind of grows back underneath and heals itself. Then I
Holy.
got hit by a car and suffered severe brain damage and damaged my occipital cortex. So I now wear glasses because of brain damage. So, yay, $5,000 for laser eye surgery.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah. So that wasn't fun. Your brain is basically about seeing movement and facial recognition. That's about 80% of it. Yeah. There we go. So I will let you. I know you've had a long day, as have a lot of us. So I will let you continue on with what you need to do in your RD world.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for being here. I do greatly appreciate you coming through and chatting. You're more than welcome to hang out and chat. I'm going to stream for a little bit longer, but not the full amount of time tonight, and I'll explain that in just a moment, chat. So I'm going to pause everything. Hey,
Hey,
Aqua,
Aqua.
Aqua Funkalistic Booty Wap. I love it.
Yeah.
I
Thanks for
love
lurking,
the name.
Aqua.
Yes, thank you.
Aqua's from my community.
Awesome. And welcome, yes, welcome to
You're
Everett.
the
Now at
best.
the end, all of the mermaid community comes up
Oh,
and
hey, Bob.
starts.
Bob, thanks for being here. I hope you're having a good day. But thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it was really great. I love chatting with people. I love chatting with artists and creative people and writers, and it's so much fun.
It is. It's. I've always enjoyed these things, and I got to say, these oftentimes tend to be some of my more popular streams because people aren't just listening to me drone on about writing; they get to hear interesting stuff. So what I'm going to do, chat, I'm just going to go back onto the be right back and mute everything, and I'll be back in just a moment after I say goodbye to our guest. So welcome all of Mermaid's chat. Should have felt. I hope you felt free to talk during chat, but it's awesome to lurk as well. I love lurkers. We love lurkers here. So we'll be right back.